Hi everybody, it's Miss Dupree. In today's lesson, we're going to take a look at the digestive system. I'm pretty sure you all know what it is. It's the system that breaks down food into tiny molecules that your body can use for energy. Let's take a closer look at how the different parts of the digestive system work. But before we start, I want to clear up a common misconception that many people have about digestion. We talk about food being broken down by digestion, and that's true. But by the time the digested material reaches the bloodstream, it's not recognizable as food anymore. In other words, if you eat this cheeseburger and it gets digested, there are not tiny little pieces of cheeseburger floating around in your bloodstream. That's gross. Instead, the food is broken all the way down to the molecular level, and these molecules of different nutrients are what your body will use for energy. So it's not food anymore. Got it? Okay, good. Let's move on. There are some terms that you need to be familiar with. There are two very basic components happening in digestion. Food is getting broken down, and food is getting moved through the digestive system from one end to the other. And we're going to look at these terms more closely. So, digestion is the process of breaking food down into molecules. And there are two types of digestion, mechanical and chemical. Mechanical digestion is a physical process of tearing the food apart, and chewing is an example of mechanical digestion, like what's happening in this video. Chemical digestion uses chemicals in your body to dissolve the food. Stomach acid is going to be an example of chemical digestion. So as the food gets broken down, it gets moved along the digestive tract. Remember in our musculoskeletal lesson, we learned that there are two types of muscles, voluntary and involuntary. Luckily for you, the muscles in our digestive system are involuntary, meaning we don't have to consciously think to make them move. Our brain does that job automatically for us. So food is moved through the digestive system in a process called peristalsis. Peristalsis is the term for muscular contractions, squeezing and relaxing, squeezing and relaxing. And as these muscles squeeze and then relax, they slowly pass the food further along the digestive tract. So through the process of mechanical and chemical digestion and the movement by peristalsis, food is broken down and travels through the digestive system until it either reaches the bloodstream or is expelled out of the body. So if you're ready, here we go. Now, digestion actually starts before you eat food. Have you ever been really hungry and seen food and your mouth starts watering? That's saliva. Saliva is spit. Your saliva has chemicals in it that help to chemically dissolve the food and break it down. So even before you eat, if your body knows you're about to eat, it starts flooding your mouth with saliva to get ready for digestion. So the first stop is the mouth. When you take a bite of food, both types of digestion happen. As you chew, the food gets torn apart into smaller pieces, and that's mechanical digestion. At the same time, the chemicals in your saliva are helping to wet down the food and dissolve it, and that's chemical digestion. And when the food particles get small enough, you swallow. Now, when you swallow, there's a small piece in your body called the epiglottis. And the epiglottis is a flap of skin, and you can see it it was right there. It's about to go away in the video. But when you swallow, the epiglottis is going to help move the food down the correct tube. Normally, the epiglottis is in the up position so that air can enter your windpipe when you breathe. But when you swallow, the epiglottis flops down just flop down to cover the windpipe so the food goes down the esophagus. And you see there, flops down, the food goes down the esophagus. And let's take one more look. After it flops down and the food passes, you see it open back up there so that you can breathe. So if you've ever swallowed wrong and you got food down the wrong pipe, it's because the epiglottis did not correctly flop into position and the food actually went into your windpipe. And so you have to cough and get that food back up. So after you swallow, the food is moved to the esophagus. And the esophagus is a tube that connects your mouth to your stomach. But the food doesn't just fall and drop down the esophagus. Instead, it gets moved by peristalsis. So you can see it here in the video. The esophagus has muscles that squeeze and contract and squeeze and contract. And as they squeeze and contract, they move the food down until it reaches the stomach. So in the stomach, the food continues to be broken down in two ways. The first is mechanical. The stomach has really strong muscles that also squeeze and contract. You can see it happening here in the video. As they squeeze, they continue breaking this food apart, and that's mechanical digestion. If you've ever heard or felt your stomach growl, that's the muscles in your empty stomach squeezing and contracting. And since your stomach is empty, the sound is really easy to hear, and your stomach is growling. The stomach also breaks down food chemically. The stomach has really powerful acids that dissolve food. Now, this acid is safe in your stomach, but sometimes you can have too much stomach acid, and sometimes it'll kind of back up into the esophagus, and that causes a burning sensation that's called acid reflux, or we also call it indigestion or heartburn. And if you've ever felt that, what you're feeling is stomach acid. So the stomach continues to move the food along by peristalsis, or involuntary muscle contractions. And by this point, the food's really broken down into tiny pieces, and you kind of have a liquidy, mushy, just mass of stuff. And the next step is the small intestine. In the small intestine, chemical digestion continues to dissolve the remaining food particles into molecules that the body can use. As the food gets fully digested and becomes nutrient molecules, it gets absorbed through the small intestine into the bloodstream. So in the small intestine, there are these tiny kind of finger-like projections called villi, or even smaller ones called microvilli. The villi and the microvilli help absorb the food, they take it in, and they pass it into the blood. And there are tiny little blood vessels in the small intestine that are called capillaries. And they're going to take these nutrient molecules, here they go, see, down the microvilli into the bloodstream, and they're going to pass through the bloodstream and into the cells, and the cells are going to use these nutrients for energy. So at this point, here in the small intestine, all of the usable nutrient molecules are going to get absorbed and passed into the bloodstream, but you still have stuff left over. In all of the food that you eat, as it gets broken down, there are leftover molecules that can't be used by the cells. And this leftover waste material is sent into the large intestine. And this is actually a real human large intestine right here. The job of the large intestine is to absorb extra liquid so that now you are left with a mostly solid material that the body needs to get rid of. And guys, that's your poop. The unusable material is going to pass out of the large intestine and into the rectum, where it gets expelled out of the body when you go to the bathroom. So that's the process of digestion. Now, it varies from person to person, but the average amount of time it takes food to digest from eating it to pooping it out is 53 hours, and that's more than 2 days. It takes about 6 to 8 hours for the food to pass through your stomach and small intestine, and the rest of the time it's getting it ready to poop out. And this is kind of interesting because scientists know the length of time it takes each part of the digestive system to do its thing. Sometimes forensics experts can determine the time of death of a murder victim by looking at their stomach contents. If they know when the victim last ate, they can determine how far along in the digestive process the victim is, and this can help them to determine the time of death. Okay, that's it for this lesson. Be sure that you know the 2 types of digestion, mechanical and chemical, what peristalsis is and how it moves food through the digestive tract, and you need to know the function of the mouth, the esophagus, I forgot the epiglottis, know what the epiglottis is, the stomach, the small intestine, including the villi, the microvilli, and the capillaries, and the large intestine. If you have any questions, please ask. Otherwise, you're all set. Great job, everybody. See you next time.